to today's conversation with the title, The Beauty of Immersion, Past, Present and Future of Cinema. Thank you, dear panelists, for joining me for that event and for sharing your very own expertise on the topic. Thank you, dear everybody, for tuning in via YouTube and Facebook. I am Bettina Wodianke and I'm curating the cultural program for the Goethe Institute San Francisco. We have been curating this special panel now with our colleagues at the Goethe Pop-Up Seattle and the German Film Office based in New York City. I want to thank my colleagues Martin Schwarz and Arabelle Liepold from the Goethe Pop-Up Seattle, as well as my colleague from the German Film Office, Sarah Stevenson, and our colleague Sopran Son, the director of Berlin and Beyond Film Festival. So thanks, as I said, for joining us for that conversation. Please submit your question at any point during the conversation on the respective platform you're following this conversation from. They will be forwarded to us, and I'm very happy to include them in our conversation. So we would love for you to be part of our talk. And also, if you also want to share any experiences during the conversation, cinematic experiences, or want to dive into certain aspects, please always let us know. It is now my great pleasure to introduce very briefly our special guest for today's conversation. Our panelists are Lisa Gotto. She's professor of film theory at the University of Vienna. The filmmaker, artist, and creative director Nimrod Shapira, Rana San, artist, curator, and artistic director at Northwest Film Forum, and documentary distributor, filmmaker, and director of the Drunken Film Festival, Arlene Golden. So, as I said, it's a great pleasure having you here. Before we delve into that topic, let me introduce how we schedule or how we structured the talk. Firstly, I will ask Lisa Gotto a few questions so that we can get a brief introduction into the research field and on today's topic on a broader level. This will be followed by presentations of Nim Shapira, Rana San, and Arlene Golden, introducing us to their respective work and their forms and creative approach to cinematic experiences as filmmakers, curators, and directors. But before we do that, I'd like to take this opportunity to ask everyone to share a filmic or cinematic experience that our panelists had that was important for you and perhaps draw you to delve into your profession as filmmakers, artists, festival directors, and researchers. What was a significant encounter with cinematic media in the broadest sense, or in the not very broad, but very specific for you personally? Who wants to start off?
Well, I can start if anybody else is mute. I had many wonderful cinematic experiences, but one in particular has stayed in my memory, and that was in the 1990s when I was a student. In the seminars, everybody talked about Citizen Kane, the greatest movie of all time. And I didn't know this film, which was infinitely embarrassing. In the film studies library, there was a kind of battered video cassette with a German dubbed version, but it was almost always borrowed. However, there was also a small cinema in Cologne, which played Citizen Kane 3 times a week in the afternoon. So I went to that cinema. And when I stood in front of the cinema box office, they explained to me that the screening will only start when at least 5 tickets are sold. Then an old lady was arriving, so there were already 2 of us. And so I started approaching the people on the streets who were passing by and tell them, see Citizen Kane, you won't regret it, come on in, see Citizen Kane. And in the end, I actually found 3 more moviegoers. Maybe they had nothing better to do. Maybe I talked them to death. Maybe it was because it started raining already, so that of course helped too. So we were a very small, peculiar film community, brought together for different reasons, but being a community for 2 hours. And when one of the moviegoers went out at the end of the movie, he said, "Oh, that was boring." And he was somebody like me who had seen the movie for the first time. But the old lady explained to us that she had lost count on how many times she had seen that film. She said, there is simply no better one. So I remember believing her more than all the ranking lists and all my fellow students.
Oh, that's a beautiful story. Thank you so much for sharing.
I love that story so much. I'm going to jump in with mine because I feel like it continues this thread. My moment that I always go back to actually happened at Northwest Film Forum, where I work now. And this was at least 11 years ago. It could have been 15 years ago. I actually have a hard time remembering which film I went to see, which I'll speak about in a moment, and I think is really interesting. But I was really excited about this film. And I went in, I bought my ticket, and I walked into the theater, and I was the only person there. And I thought, oh man, that's such a bummer. They're not going to start the film for one person. I'm not going to get to watch this movie. And I waited for a little bit, and I was thinking maybe some folks would arrive and some latecomers would trickle in. And I was preparing to be asked to leave, but I had picked my seat, and I was going to stake my claim until I was told to leave. And the theater got dark, the trailer started, some mysterious person in the booth pressed play, and I watched the movie all by myself in the theater. And in that moment, I remember thinking, wow, these people really get me. And even though I didn't meet anybody except the person who sold me my ticket that day, I felt like I was becoming a part of this sort of secret club that I never even knew existed. And I really felt seen. And I think it's telling that I really can't recall what the film was, but the experience has stayed with me so strongly.
I'm happy to go next. I was having some trouble with this just because, you know, so many movies throughout life. But I kind of latched on to the part of the prompt, I guess, addressing me as a festival director and thinking, you know, like what has informed that? What was like formative of that early on? And I came upon in my mind the first film festival I ever went to. Though it was a traveling festival, I don't know if you could really call it a festival because it was just one program screened in a theater. But this was maybe like 2003, 2004, called the Animation Show. And it was something that was happening from Mike Judge and Don Hertzfeld. And they were touring this program of short animated films from, you know, a wide range of times and countries and themes and styles. I pulled it out right here, animation show. And you could kind of get a sense actually on the back, just all the different sort of films that were playing and all the different artists. But it was in Chicago at the landmark Century Cinema. I took like a whole gaggle of friends, convinced them to go. We took up like a whole row in the theater, and it was just like revelatory, I guess, seeing this kind of mixtape approach of like, you know, just the contrast between films programmed next to each other. And I think I've never really thought about it consciously, but I think it's something I internalized and have put forth in my own programming practice of really trying to, you know, our programs at the festival aren't relegated to genres or any sort of unified theme. They're just kind of, you know, here's a doc, here's a cartoon, here's something sad, here's something scary, you know. And you know, I think it's an exciting and fulfilling way to experience film programming. So yeah.
So I'll go next. I have two quick stories. One is in 1999, coming out of a movie you might have heard of called The Matrix, was actually mind-blowing for me, as a teenager thinking about, are we living in a simulated world? So I forgot to say that my examples are related to the immersive world and not to the flatties, as we call it, to the 2D flat cinema. So with the immersive world, yeah, Matrix played a huge part for me, even though it was 20 years ago. Just thinking about in terms of like what is reality, where are we when we're experiencing it. And my second example is a VR short that's called Battle Scar. It's on the Oculus store, and I recommend all of you to watch it, by Atlas 5, a French studio. And when I first watched this VR film, it blew my mind because as film students, you always talk with film students about the Lumiere brothers and their short documentary about the train going into the station and how audiences ran away from the station. And we all laugh about it. We all like, how can that be? And with this experience, there's a scene where I'm standing on the New York subway and the train passed you by, and this is so realistic that you scream. You just like, you can't really understand, you just scream. And I was so amazed by how it affected me that I watched it the second time. The second time when the train passed me by, I entered my head into the train that was moving, and I was really able to look at the passengers, and it was so realistic. I had to tell myself that the next time I'm jumping on the train in New York, I need to remember not to do this, because it was so realistic that it really, really imprinted me like with a memory. So these are my two short stories.
Thank you so very much for sharing this. This is already like, we have been delving into that quite deep, I feel, with all of that, how it affected all of you in the situations. And that's, I think, so much fascination already in that. Thank you so much for sharing. Let's start. So, and we have already, but with the first speaker, I would like to introduce Professor Dr. Lisa Gotto. And Lisa Gotto's main research interests are in media history and media theory, film studies, and digital media culture. Her research in cinema and digital media focuses on film culture and film aesthetics over a variety of historical periods, including transformative processes in audience agency, moving image culture between cinema and post-cinema, and interaction and immersion in digital media environments. She has published widely on film culture and film aesthetics, comparative media studies, and game studies. One of her recent publications I want to mention here is Hollywood im Zeitalter des Post-Cinema, eine kritische Bestandsaufnahme, published last year, and short, Hollywood in the Age of Post-Cinema. Lisa, to begin in medias res, let's start this conversation with some basic terms in your research and in film and media theory in general, so we can then set the stage for everything to come during the conversation. So we are currently in a time of upheaval due to the many technological innovations and the associated potentials for creative storytelling on the side of the cinematic production. On the viewer side, this means an upheaval in the forms of reception. The once close relationship between film and cinema has been loosening for a long time before the pandemic suspended the same completely. And yet the cinema as a place is sorely missed, or seems to be sorely missed, by many, both on the production and the reception side. A critic wrote, "There is the horrible feeling we might be witnessing the ends of cinema as we know it." Lisa, what are the elements of the cinema that make the cinematic experience so very popular and special from your perspective as a researcher?
Well, in film theory, the arrangement of cinema has been described with the term dispositif. And what is meant by this is the concrete material overall arrangement that must be given in order for the cinema perception to come about. So the dispositif connects film and spectator and participates in the effects of film. And the central elements of this arrangement, are the immobility of the viewer, his spatial positioning between projector and screen, and the darkening of the cinema hall. So these are the classic elements that have been described by film theory to constitute the cinema dispositif. And this also includes the fact that the viewer has no possibility to intervene in what is happening on the screen. And all this leads to a specific situation of perception and attention, which dispositif theory understands as an arrangement determining cinema. And while this understanding of the specificity of the cinematic situation was formative for a long time, today we must assume an expansion of audiovisual experiences. And in this process, the spectrum of perceptual modalities is expanded as a consequence of a kind of dissolution of the boundaries of cinematic seeing.
Thank you so much. So in the introduction of the anthology that's ended, I know this is such a broad question before it, so I very much appreciate you being very specific around that. So in the anthology I mentioned before, the Hollywood in the Age of Post-Cinema, you're writing about the Entortung des Films, the delocation of film in the age of post-cinema. Could you briefly introduce us to the main reasons for that development and the main emphasis also of the, I would say, fairly new term post-cinema?
With post-cinema, we mean something that follows cinema and its dominance. And we usually use this term to address an open transformation and shift of coordinates. So we speak of a kind of emergence of a new cinematic space, which is opened up by a multitude of cultural and technological developments. So think of the fact that we see moving images on displays, on screens, while walking, while shopping, in social media, and even in the cinema when we take out our smartphones. So here, the post means the dissolution of boundaries, the diffusive circulation of film that is no longer bound to the cinematic dispositif, because the appearance and use of film have become too heterogeneous. So the cinematic is now a free performative process with an open outcome and basically in infinite ramifications. So film can be made spontaneously without much planning, in good quality with our smartphones. It can be sent to the internet in a few seconds. Think of streaming services holding a variety of different series and films. Think of digital film production. Think of special filters that make a cinematic look possible. And this is so strange and also funny, precisely because this is only a kind of virtual filter. So we do have special filters to make a cinematic look. Precisely, it is intended to simulate the characteristics of an analog camera. So all of these offer a kind of new remediation. Think of film snippets that are combined with emojis or filmed persons that are equipped with cat-like features. Think of mashups that have long since become commonplace in digital short news services, or think of deepfake videos modified with artificial intelligence techniques. All of these oscillate between artificiality and authenticity. So here, concepts that have been developed in the engagement with cinema continue to be valuable, but they need to be taken further.
Thank you so much. That's very interesting, because when you talk about how much we live in this visual world, also in the various formats, I'm also wondering, when I look at film history or film theory or media theory in general, and about the different elements that play a role in cinema, and how we get immersed, then I also think about the role of the sound, for example, that hasn't been really dominantly looked at, I would say, in the last 10-15 years, but you know better about that, that this came into like the theory more and more, that one looked more into also, okay, what is also the effects and the immersion of sounds in that regards, or what does sounds play, what role does it play in this? So, and you already also, you have already also written about that. So I would be curious to hear from your perspective about this role.
Yeah. Well, while the history of immersion is long and wide, and Nim already mentioned the Lumiere brothers, I absolutely agree that the history of sound is a kind of, it's really a decisive piece in this history of immersion. For time reasons, I better pick out just one aspect here very, very briefly. But I think as an aesthetic phenomenon, sound is not only bound to space, it can also have a space creating effect itself. So beginning in the mid-70s, this potential was charged both in terms of sound technology and sound staging in ways that radically transformed the cinematic experience. With the introduction of multi-channel systems, Dolby, stereo, and surround sound, sound began to expand in a polydirectional fashion. So I think the cinema experience in the digital age is increasingly characterized by the establishment of highly equipped sound spaces. And the immersive potential results, on the one hand, from the technically perfected suppression of ambient noise. So the rattling of the projector has long since disappeared in the cinema space. We don't hear it anymore. Or think of the THX standard. It also makes it possible to swallow external influences like the noise of the air conditioning system, for example. So on the one hand, this is one facet of the immersive potential, and on the other hand, there is a distribution of loudspeakers that enhances the enveloping sound experiences. And I think this is associated with a change from distant viewing to involved sensation. So the viewer is no longer a passive recipient of narrative information who remains external to the film, but a bodily being who is acoustically, spatially, and somatically interwoven into the texture of film. And by allowing sound to fully surround the audience, a charging of the auditorium takes place. So the film extends into the auditorium instead of being confined to the front area. And further, I think the spatial omnipresence of sound also evokes the haptic. So the sound space is not only able to envelop the audience, but also to physically hit them through the sound waves. For example, when bass tones hit us in the stomach. So the acoustic thus implies a proximity that is very closely related to contact and touch. And I believe that this specific immersive potential still distinguishes the cinema space from watching a movie at home. And I think it will continue to be a decisive factor in the future as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, because you touched already so many points in that that I think we could get back to after delving into examples now. But I think it's also very interesting when I think about, yeah, I can always close my eyes, but I can't never really close my ears. So this distance is, yeah, I can easily distance myself visually, but not from the sound. Thank you so much. And speaking of transformation, new technologies and post-cinema, as well as the creation of immersive experiences, let's delve into the topic further with our second panelist, Nimrod Shapira. Nim Shapira is a filmmaker, artist, and creative director working at the intersection of storytelling and technological innovation. And his work spans a spectrum of the moving image, from traditional linear filmmaking to virtual reality experiences. He won several awards for his films, digital campaigns, commercials, interactive experiences, and XR projects. His first virtual reality experience that I'm super excited about is Bystanding, and it will have its world premiere at the 2021 Tribeca Film Festival that celebrates storytelling in all its forms. Moreover, Nim is a 2021 fellow at the MIT Open Documentary Lab. Nim, thank you so much for being here, and we are now looking forward to having the opportunity to exploring your work further. The screen is all yours.
Thank you so much. Before I begin, I want to say that German language has 300,000 words. The English language has 150 words, and Hebrew only have 30,000 words. But in Hebrew, we say cinema, we say kolnoa, which means sounds and vision. So even though we have 10% of the amount of words in the German language, we treat it as a whole experience of sound and vision. So yeah, I just wanted to brag about about Hebrew for a second. So I will share my screen, and thank you so much for the introduction and having me be in this panel. One second, I need to share this. Thank you for your patience, and we are sharing. So thank you so much for this introduction. And as you said, I come from doing both my art, but also a lot of commercial work. And we all know, and we all talk about how we use art and technology to drive sales, whether it's the box office or shopping. But using art to empower people and drive social change is something that I'm trying to do in my practice, in my artistic practice. And you know, as an 80s kid, we all had the ViewMaster at our at our possession, picking our eyes through this machine and looking at, I don't know, Disney World or scenes out of movies. So we always looked at how we can get immersed or how can we get into a 3D space. I think ever since, you know, we painted on caves. Art drives innovation, and it's not only that it drives innovation. With art, we can confront and reflect and challenge reality. And what I'm in my practice, it's not only about the technological innovation, but for me personally, I care about elevating stories that matter and that deserve the medium that I'm using to tell that story. If we zoom out, we are all filmmakers. So if we zoom out for a second, one of the challenges that we are facing today in the digital era is that on one hand, all of us are very much connected. You know, I can talk to anyone around the world. On the other hand, we are much more disconnected from each other. We are all staring at our phones and not really paying attention to, you know, what is going on around us. And I think that with VR becoming a household device, we are really, really disconnecting ourselves, not only from, you know, people we pass around in the street, but also from our family members or our pets. So the third thing that what I'm trying to do with my artistic practice is trying to reconnect people to this, you know, larger terms such as empathy, which I know is a very loaded and big word. So with VR, you know, we can create an experience of a world that is surrounding us. Whether it's we have an agency, we can embody someone else, and we have a presence that our experience creates a memory that once we take off the VR headset, we just came out of a different world. And Lisa spoke earlier about, we are sitting in a dark theater. We can't really communicate with the screen unless we're young and we shout at the screen, the protagonist, watch out, the villain is behind you. But with VR, the sky is the limit, and we can really do anything we want. So the question is, what are we doing with this new medium? And a few years ago, 6 or 7, a pioneer filmmaker and producer Chris Milk gave a very famous TED Talk and spoke about how VR is the ultimate empathy machine. And 6 or 7 years later, we can say that it's not an empathy machine. There's a lot of academic discussion about this. And if we look at the entire spectrum of engagement, we cannot really we cannot really feel empathy with someone else, even though we become someone else in a VR experience, because we can never know what another person is going through, whether it's a virtual reality experience that can that tells you the story of someone who went blind, or a virtual reality experience of someone. There was a very famous experience called Clouds Over Sidra about immigrants, about dispositioned immigrants in camps in Syria. So again, what can we do? And this is a question with this new medium, and how can we drive the participant to be more compassionate after they take off the VR headset? So that's the field that I'm interested in. And as Bettina said, my first virtual reality experience is going to premiere in 2 weeks, and you can access it anywhere with the with the power of a virtual headset in your home, or in if you're in New York. And this experience was created by me along with a German team and a Canadian team, another World Studio, which is based in Berlin, and Kung Fu Studio, which is based in Canada. And this is a 15-minute short VR, which is a hybrid between documentary and fiction, and it features both live action and animation. And I'm just going to dive into what led me to create this experience. So we all are familiar with the bystander effect. The bystander effect, was first coined in the 60s, a very famous story by the New York Times about Kitty Genovese, who was murdered in Queens, New York, and for almost an hour she cried for help and no one helped her. This was later this news story was later debunked. People did help her, but the social and psychological phenomena that, as you know, diffused intervention. If people diffuse responsibility, if the more people that are present to someone in distress, the less likely that one of them will help, because we all think that the other person will do it. That's something that has been with humankind for centuries or more. And when I started thinking about what would be my first virtual reality experience, I thought that in a virtual reality experience, we can really, really do everything that we want. We can move, we can act, we can change things. So we can be active. In reality, with the bystander effect, people choose to be passive. And the dissonance between being passive in real life and being active in a virtual reality world was the thing that sparked my imagination. And that's how I started my journey with VR, looking into cases of the bystander effect that happened around the world. And immediately I remembered this case that happened in my hometown, Tel Aviv, 12 years ago, where a championship, a rower champion drowned for almost 5 minutes, and with almost 20 people standing on the riverbank, and nobody really jumped in for 5 minutes. So I chose to reenact this incident, this case. And this case was interesting for me for several reasons. One of them was that the victim is not really seen. They are underwater, you don't know who they are. And the second thing that was very, very interesting for me is not the story of the victim, the story of the bystanders. What was going through their minds as they are not jumping into the water, starting to explore those, confessions. So I'm going to be talking about the concept, and then I'm going to show how I executed the experience. What I imagined is doing some sort of an onboarding, having Jasmine, the victim who survived, because after 5 minutes, someone did save her life. So she will be narrating the first 1 minute and talking about that day where she drowned, and can anybody, can the participant that's putting on the headset, can they find the person who would save her life? So the camera is going over the river. It's like a very, very beautiful afternoon in a central Tel Aviv park. And as the camera goes closer and closer, and the participant can really look around in 360, they suddenly see a capsized kayak. And after that, they are transitioned into the riverbank. And if you can see on the left side, there are all of the bystanders. If you look behind you, you will see the capsized kayak. And this is a 6 degrees of freedom experience. So you can really walk anywhere you want in the park that we scanned in 3D and step into someone's shoes. Once you step into someone's shoes, the experience transitions you to their POV, to their stream of conscience, to the memory they had from that day. And the experience ends with the actual footage from that day of a 60-year-old person who saved her life. So I know I only have 4 minutes to go through the experience, so I'm going to do it really, really quick. Is that okay, Bettina?
Absolutely, go for it. Completely.
So the experience is compromised out of, I think, three pillars. One is volumetric capturing. We scanned actors who portray the real bystanders from that day. So this technology basically creates a hologram of the actor or the actress. And these are cameras from all sides that capture their behavior as if you're standing in front of them. Think of Madame Tussauds, but much more realistic and as holograms. We 3D reconstructed the park. So you could move anywhere you want in the park, go to any corner of the park that you want. You can go to a very distant bench or a trash can, or you can just look at the peaceful river with the capsized kayak, and 360 2D and 3D animations that serves as the stream of conscious bits. So this is part of the planning that we did, storyboarding and writing the characters. As I said before, I come from the field of interactive storytelling, so there are endless amounts of narrative structures that one can create when we're dealing with an interactive story. This experience is architecture. The architecture of this experience starts with the prologue, which I talked about. We see the river, and then once we are in the park, you can witness or enter the body of 6 protagonists, 6 people who were at the park, and the clock is ticking. She's underwater for 5 minutes. So there is no chance for you to really experience all of the confessions. Whatever you can experience up to 5 minutes. And that also creates repeatability, gives you a sense of FOMO, and also gives you the sense of there are endless amounts of stories. No story is right or wrong. You're only watching a chunk out of reality. So this is part of the scanning that we did. This is the German team, another world VR, which scanned, as you see, with their DSLR cameras and iPhones, every bit of the park, so it can later be reconstructed in 3D. And this is how it looks later. And I'm gonna skip the the visuals because I'm just gonna show a 1-minute trailer. This is our cast of Israeli and Palestinian actors, which are very, very amazing actors, all of them, and I'm very, very happy that they are part of this film. And yeah, I'm just gonna play the 1-minute teaser so you see what happened.
I didn't give her any CPR. They didn't pull her out of the kayak.
The factory nearby was pumping waste.
The Torah does tell us, neither shall thou stand against the blood of thy neighbor.
But if anything goes wrong, don't be looking at me to jump in and bail you out.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Nim, for taking us on that very, very exciting journey of how you came up with the idea, what matters for you in your, or what is important in your work. That's very interesting when this, how you describe the process when it comes to what medium am I, well, exploring a special topic in, which medium is the one I think this fits in a way. This is such an interesting process to get a glimpse into that, because there are so many opportunities, I feel, in this time we are living in, and so many decisions to make as well. When I think now about bystanding, I think about that very personal also experience I can make, because there is this offer you're making all of us entering this room. So I can make my own decisions, or I can kind of sample that, even if I don't know what the consequences are, or how, what I am missing perhaps also. And the next time I can have a completely different experience. What did this experience, potential completely personal experience, was that something you thought of, okay, this would trigger something that I'm communicating then with myself about that, or like this would be, isn't an important part from the very beginning on?
In terms of what this, I think I will start it in I will answer you with a question. When we deal with virtual reality experiences and what it triggers, as you said, for us as participants, it's really, really important. You know, when you go to a movie, you buy the ticket, you buy the popcorn. At the end, you talk about the movie with your friends, you recommend the movie to your friends. With VR, onboarding and offboarding is very, very important, especially if the experience that you are watching is triggering in some sort. You don't know what the person, you know, we often talk about like, I cried in VR, you know, what does that really mean? And when you're telling a story, especially a story like this, I'm very glad that when people experience it, they always share with me a story, a personal story that they experienced, either as a victim or as someone who helped or as someone who didn't help. They often ask themselves or myself, like, what would you do if you were on that riverbank? So the fact that these questions surface after they experience the experience are really, you know, mind-blowing for me, and you know, it's above and beyond my expectations. But that's really something that is fascinating for me, and continues the discussion from a 2D world to a 3D world.
That's really fascinating when you talk about the onboarding and offboarding, and that people would share their experiences with you afterwards, and how they are sharing then that, and not like you say, this is so different in the cinema. Yeah, perhaps I'm also like starting a conversation with somebody who's standing in line in front of me, and when the break, and I've been living in Switzerland for almost 9 years, and I was always like this break that I was not used to, and you would stand in line for getting something to drink, and then you would like just as an incident talk to somebody about something. But this is then with the VR experience, like you say, not the case. Like that's super exciting, and I would love to get back to these kind of also the question and when it comes to empathy, what does it mean? And because I think there is so much in there with our perhaps also vision that this could be still an empathy machine in a way. And in the educational field, I think it's also very often now used also in schools to build up on that. Thank you so very much, Nim. I would love to get back to that, but generating cinematic experiences play also a central role in the artistic and curatorial work of our next panelist, Rana San. Through collective cinematic experiences, she supports a public dialogue and creative action. Rana is the artistic director at Northwest Film Forum, a nonprofit film and arts center for community presenting programs across the genres of film, performance, and sound, as well as it includes educational programs for young filmmakers. Northwest Film Forum is Seattle's premier film arts organization. Rana co-curates year-round community programming that she will talk very soon about, and her creative practice melds dream work, written words, embodied movement, video poetry, and analog photography. She uses experimental modes of visual storytelling to examine intimacy and independence as spiritual tools for survival. In community, Rana crafts collective experiences that celebrate the work of independent artists and activists who center emergent practices in moving image, media, and contemporary performing arts. Such a great pleasure, Rana, having you here. And I'm now looking forward to that we have the opportunity to explore your work further. The screen is all yours.
Thank you so much. Well, I'll start out by saying, you know, it's been an interesting year for art house cinemas, as it has been for many, many folks out there in the world. And last year we just celebrated our 25th anniversary as an organization, which was very exciting, and it was all virtually done. So I'm gonna also share my screen and see if I can get this presentation up so that it's running in the background while I am speaking. All right, so I'll give you a little bit of background of just the organization and give you a sense of the breadth of our work, because we're not just a film exhibition space. Northwest Film Forum was founded in 1995 by a collective of artists and has now continued to stand its ground and to have a physical presence in Seattle as a film and arts nonprofit, an independent film and arts nonprofit. And as Bettina mentioned, our mission is to incite creative public dialogue and creative action through collective cinematic experiences. And so what this means for us is that each year we present hundreds of films, film series, festivals, community programs and events, multidisciplinary performances, and public discussions in our space. This image is an image that was taken by one of my coworkers just after we closed our doors, just after we shuttered in March 2020. And as a comprehensive visual arts, visual media organization, the Forum also offers educational workshops and artist services for film and media makers to support them at all stages of their development. And we're located in Capitol Hill in Seattle, which is a really vibrant neighborhood, ever-changing. And the majority of our programs right now, since we moved to a virtual platform, are priced on a sliding scale so that we can maintain some semblance of financial accessibility in this moment as we make the transition slowly back to our physical space. We host a lot of different programs, and I'm going to highlight just a few of those festivals, our core festivals that really define who we are as an organization and are so different from each other, but I wanted to give you a sense of what some of those are. So our Children's Film Festival Seattle is a festival really for children of all ages, including adults. And so the films cover a range of topics and languages, and all of the short films that are presented during this festival, they also explore really timely and important themes, including things like environmentalism and gender identity, equity. And so these are really beautiful films. This is an internationally renowned festival, and we're so honored to continue hosting it. By Design Festival is another festival that we host. It is a cross-cultural exploration of people, structures, and ideas at the intersection of design and the moving image. And By Design features an inclusive selection of films, performances, interactive activities, all examining sort of how humanity's understanding of itself is central to the ways in which it creates the physical world around it. Cadence Video Poetry is, I love all of our festivals, but this one is definitely one of my favorites and kind of a baby. It was the first festival I started when I took on my first role at Northwest Film Forum, and now it's in its fourth year. And Cadence Video Poetry Festival approaches video poetry as a literary genre that's presented as visual media. And this is in an effort to create and cultivate new meaning from the combination of text and moving image. This festival features screenings, an artist residency for generative new work, a generative workshop for youth and adults, juried awards, and it's just a really precious Pacific Northwest-based program around creating growth around the medium of video poetry, which is a surprising genre. So many people are working in this field, and you wouldn't know. And finally, our fourth festival that takes place in September, we're actually inviting submissions right now, is Local Sightings Film Festival. This is a Pacific Northwest media and filmmakers based festival, and it really serves as an opportunity for folks living and working in the Pacific Northwest and making work out there to present their work perhaps for the first time. It served as a launching pad for a lot of local makers, and it's just an incredible collection of films that really represent a diversity of voices present in the Pacific Northwest. And because it'll be online, it was online last year, it'll be online and in person this year, hopefully. And so it's really special for folks to be able to experience a regional festival internationally. There are some other programs that we host that I also wanted to highlight because they're the types of programs that can only really be experienced in the theater. The physical building is necessary for this to happen. Puget Soundtrack is one of those programs, and it's a program where we invite a local band or artist to create an original live score to a feature-length film. And here, one of the artists was playing the marimba and did a whole feature-length film just on the marimba, and it was one of the most spectacular experiences of my life. And again, this is something that really can't be replicated virtually. It requires that we gather in person and that we experience the acoustics of the space sort of unfolding around us as we experience the film at the same time. And similarly, we have another program called Nocturnal Emissions that we're eager to get back to once we're back in the theater. It's a horror film meets burlesque event where the program opens with a burlesque show and is followed by some trivia and games, and then we launch into the horror film of the night. And this was another one of those programs where one of our speakers exploded during it, one of them. It just decided to give out, came crashing to the ground during one of the most tense scenes of the film. And it's moments like that really matter, which is really crazy to say. I'm glad no one was hurt when the speaker fell, no one was standing under it. But it's those moments that, again, you can't recreate, and everybody who was there that night will remember when that speaker exploded. And Nocturnal Emissions is one of our collaborative community partner programs. And so I wanted to highlight also, we don't just host our own events. We actually very much, the majority of our space is given to community partnerships. And pictured here are just a few of the partners that we had over the course of last year. We hosted 2 Turkish film festivals, the Romanian Film Festival in Seattle. We collaborated with Sundance on hosting some workshops, the Social Justice Film Festival, Seattle Asian American Film Festival, and Strange Storytelling Hour, which is a live storytelling hour event. And these programs take up the majority, really, of a huge portion of what we present in our space physically and also now virtually. Part of what's happened during the pandemic is a lot of organizations and community groups who lost their physical spaces, their access to other organizations where they used to host their programs and where they used to gather as a community, came to us. And so we've extended use of both our virtual platform for the time being, and then we'll return to the cinema and continue hosting these programs in our theater. They always include some form of special drinks and food, and it's just a really, really lively celebration around all of these programs that we host together. So just in the March 2020 to March 2021 window, we hosted 21 festivals over the course of that, with organizations that that needed a space and needed a platform to continue to reach their audiences and their communities. And of course, our ongoing German film series, German Cinema Now, is hosted in collaboration with Goethe Pop-Up Seattle. And I'll run through just a few other things that we do as an organization, because again, we're not just a film exhibition space. We also, during the pandemic, became a granting organization. For the Collective Power Fund, we teamed up with the Andy Warhol Foundation for Visual Arts and their regional regranting program. And so our first round of grants were dispersed to artists who were in need of emergency funds to help cover basic living costs, medical and childcare expenses. And we recently just awarded 6 artists with an artist development grant, which was a values-based grant for early to emerging artists based in King County. And they received a cash award for this, and they'll have an opportunity to have a group exhibition at a space called King Street Station in Seattle. We also launched the Lynn Shelton of a Certain Age grant, and this is an honoring and of the legacy of beloved filmmaker Lynn Shelton. And we launched this grant in collaboration with the Duplass Brother Productions. And it's a $25,000 unrestricted cash grant that is awarded annually to a woman or non-binary US filmmaker, age 39 or older. And the key there of a certain age, Lynn was 39 when she made her first feature film. And there are so few platforms and opportunities for women of that age to receive funding, to develop to launch their careers at that stage. And so we launched this grant in an effort to continue supporting filmmakers who are perhaps further along in age. And finally, moving into some of the artist services that we provide. One of our programs is called RG Pro, Remove the Gap Productions, and it's Northwest Film Forum's film apprenticeship program. And it's a full-scale production company. It's an opportunity for to support and uplift the careers of girls, women, non-binary, femme, trans, and gender non-conforming filmmakers. It's a really incredible program. It's been going for 19 plus years, and we're really honored to be able to continue its legacy forward. We also host youth summer camps to make sure that we get youth thinking about what it means to be storytelling and using visual means for storytelling at an early stage. And our summer camps are some of the most popular programs that we host. And finally, we have a fiscal sponsorship program. And this is one of our more underrated programs that we do. A lot of folks don't know about it, but we actually support about 60 film projects and organizations at the moment. And in doing so, we extend our 501c3 nonprofit status as a sponsor for the project. And this allows them to receive grants and have fundraising opportunities that are otherwise only available to officially registered nonprofit organizations. And this is an image, a still from the film Thin Skin, which is a local production that we fiscally sponsor. Our recent virtual screening of the film drew over 1,700 viewers internationally, which was really, really special. So that's just sort of an overview of who we are as an organization. And I'm sure Bettina will dive more into what it means to be in a virtual space and a physical space. But I just wanted to give an overview at least, so you have a sense of all of the various things that we're doing.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Rana. It's incredible how fast you, I think within 3 days, you adapted 5 days, you adapted to the situation and really reacted to it, but not just like in regards to your own programs, but in close conversation with the community and the community's needs in this regard. When it comes to, and there are so many questions with a space that is so open, and so you're working incredible interdisciplinary. And then I also think about your curating the festivals. So how was that with the video poetry festival you mentioned? Because there were so many changes within the last year. How did the, when it comes to submissions, I'm always not sure what to expect actually, because there were so many challenges. How was that in when it comes to the festival actually?
It was amazing to see, even just in its 4th year for Cadence Video Poetry Festival, how the range of submissions shifted and evolved. This year, I was really struck by the number of submissions that were made just in 2020 and 2021 alone. So people were, it was really encouraging actually to see that folks were generating new work and were inspired to use video poetry itself as the medium through which to sort of express what was happening in the moment. So many of the films were direct responses to what was happening in the world, direct responses to the sense of isolation. Many of the films were made by individuals or pod teams, people that were already living together and working together. And so that was really interesting to see as well, that there was this sort of retreat into this experimental mode of telling, now that, you know, the normal means of production weren't available to us. And so everyone sort of slowed down and simplified and really got down to the core of what they were wanting to express. A lot of the films covered a range of topics, most notably were in response to the social and racial injustices that had been happening over the course of the year and were very present in people's hearts and minds. And some of those films, when we watched them, some of them we presumed had been made recently because so many of the films were, and noticed that many of them came from years past as well. And so there was sort of this continuity, and this very unfortunate continuity in this story that wasn't changing, that this violence is continuing to happen, and that a film made 5 years ago is still relevant today, and it could have been made yesterday. So those were some of the things that I was noticing with Cadence specifically.
Interesting that you mentioned that experimental approach. That's very interesting. I feel that this increased in a way. And also when I think about your artistic works, the experiments seems for me that it plays an important role in your work. Also when it comes to immersion and technology, would you a little further tell us about that?
Yeah, you know, there's something about experimental works that when it comes to the storytelling itself, when you can kind of throw out whatever you think the rules are and really use your own means and mode and really drop into your own voice. I think that's what I value most as a programmer, and in the moments that I have time to make my own video work, is finding your voice and finding what your story is, and then being really open to what the format is that it needs to be told in. And one of the things that I love about how, I'll use the Video Poetry Festival as an example again, because it's just so perfect. We take a lot of care when we're piecing together the sequence and series of the films, for instance. And so, you know, thinking about how folks have chosen, whether the film is silent, if it's black and white, if it uses text in the graphics itself, or if it's just spoken, and to vary the experience of the viewer as well, so that when they're watching, that they have this variety of things that they're flowing through, or that a silent film isn't followed by something with a really jarring soundtrack immediately after. And I think about this also with, you know, placing, sort of being strategic about the breaks. And I think in our first year in Cadence, we flowed just from one film to the next, back to back, and found when we were actually in the theater and watching that we needed a breath. Video poetry can be a lot to take in, and they're all short. Our first rule was nothing over 5 minutes, but even 5 minutes of video poetry can feel like a lot depending on where the artist decides to take you. So eventually we decided we would build in 5 seconds of just blank screen to give folks an opportunity to breathe. And those are some of my favorite things when it comes to really creating the experience, extending the experience, the visual experience of this experimental mode of taking in information to the experience that's happening around you in the theater, and what it means for people to be chewing popcorn during the silent film, or looking around at each other and wondering, is that a mistake? Did they just mess up the audio? Are they going to restart it? Or getting bored and pulling out their phones because we're so used to being bombarded by stimulation. So some of those things, again, I'm really looking forward to being back in the theater to revive some of those embodied experiences, which I think are missing from the virtual realm right now. You know, Lisa spoke to the agency of the participants and the viewers, which is less present in the theater. You can get up and leave, but then you're making the choice to miss something. Whereas at home, you can press pause for as long as you like, and you can wait multiple days until you decide to return to it. And so this balance between who's deciding on what that viewing experience is, and the relationship that it takes, like the trust it takes to walk into a theater and say, I trust this organization, I trust this curator to have me changed, to offer some opportunity for transformation. And I'm going to stay with it for as long as I can. And if I need to leave, then I know that I have that free will, but otherwise the films are going to roll in the order that they were intended and at the rate at which they were intended. And so there's something really special about that, where, you know, it's kind of fun to let yourself not have to be the one choosing when to press play and when to press stop.
Thank you so very much for bringing us back, or mentioning the theater space and the trust, actually. I also feel this is such a crucial point. And especially when it comes to, well, curating a shorts program, that is so interesting to explore then without being really prepared for that. And with that, thank you, Rana. I would now lead over to our last panelist, last but not least, because accessibility and creating a shared experience as well as a dialogue and exchange and an unusual encounter for the community, potentially, through cinematic forms plays also a very important role for Arlene. Arlene Golden, this is our last panelist, and Arlene is an all-round film person living and working in the Bay Area. So coming back to San Francisco in this regards, close to San Francisco, fairly close. He rarely dreams, he says, but the most frequent ones are the ones where it's finals and he hasn't been to class all semester. I would love to dive into that. Arlene received his BA in film studies in 2010. Is a documentary distributor and filmmaker, and runs Drunken Film Festival Oakland, which shows short films. The festival has been voted 2019 to 2019's best new cultural event by East Bay Express readers. And Arlene, I am so now looking forward to learn more about the festival and your work.
Sure, yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a joy to listen to everyone talk so far, um, and be very prepared relative to me. Um, well, first off, I say all around film person. Another word might be dilettante. Another word might be vertically integrated. Working in production, exhibition, distribution, and also criticism to some degree. So I have my hands in a lot of cookie jars, and all the cookie jars kind of mix and meld and interact in interesting ways. Co-director of Video Project, which has been distributing documentary films for over 35 years. And we have reformatted recently as a nonprofit, of which I'm the co-director. And we are focused on creating social impacts through film screenings, primarily to schools, libraries, and other non-theatrical institutions. Right now, we're very focused on issues of racial justice in education. Um, in filmmaking, I've worked for a number of years with a creative partner and lifelong friend, Brian Gersten, producing his short films. And most recently directed an experimental short documentary called Backyard, about my backyard, which screened most recently at Prismatic Ground, a new virtual festival that was born out of the situation this year. And will actually be screening next weekend as part of Winnipeg Underground Film Festival, which is another free streaming event. I do some criticism, mostly focused on contemporary documentaries, and interviews, also focused on documentarians, having interviewed folks like Ramel Ross, Steve James, a number of new up-and-coming feature directors, subjects like Jane Goodall, and Frederick Weissman. I'm embarked right now on a podcast project delving into the work of Frederick Weissman, film by film, featuring noted Weissman and documentary scholars. And oh yeah, The Room. I have all these movies, and it was, I think when I was a kid, I thought I was always going to run a video rental store, and that proved to be less of a thing as I grew into adulthood. But the dream persisted, and I took the opportunity of the pandemic this year, where I think many of us were experiencing streaming and scrolling fatigue, to launch Movie Friends, which is a video rental service. Currently serving Oakland, but if you live in SF, shoot us a message. And we're a program of Pro Arts Commons in Oakland, and rent some movies. I deliver it on my bike. It's fun. It's a project I've embarked with my creative partners, Bernadette McVeary and Daniel Turner, who co-organized Drunken Film Fest Oakland with me. It is now, we're now preparing for our 4th year. Our submissions are open on Film Freeway, seeing a lot of good stuff. The festival was originally founded by Jackie Griffin in Bradford, England, after the Bradford International Film Festival dissolved. So their city was left without a film festival of any kind, and she took it upon herself to rectify that. And she chose bars to do it because of the exorbitant theater rental fees. So the bars got extra business from film going public. She got a free space to show a lot of interesting work, and it worked out. And she asked me to come on board as the programmer of the documentary films for her festival. And after the second year, which I attended in person, she gave me her blessing to adapt the festival in Oakland. So our first year was in 2018. 6 different bars. Each night we're in a different bar, popping up with our own projection equipment and sound equipment. We really take over the space every night we're there. So there's really no escaping us. A lot of people obviously show up for the event, but there are a lot of people who just went out to enjoy a night of drinking at the bar, and all of a sudden they see some experimental, documentary or something. And they're like, what's going on over here? And we've heard countless times people tell us we're the first film festival they've ever been to, which is always great to hear. I could screen share our trailer from last year's event, which I'll talk a little more about afterwards. Boop. So yeah, last year everything was different for everyone all the time. But I was pretty dead set on trying to figure out some kind of way to do this in person still. Obviously, it wasn't going to happen at bars. The reason for that is my own experience as a filmmaker and getting my short out into the world. It was, well, first, uh, the short I produced and voice acted in, directed by Brian Gersten, called The Great Toilet Paper Scare, premiered at Big Sky in February, right before everything happened, and we attended in Montana. It was a great experience. You could watch that film now in the Atlantic, as it became just weirdly prescient and relevant a month later, dealing with a toilet paper shortage in the 70s. And then Backyard was set to premiere at Ann Arbor Film Festival the next month in March, which I had planned to attend. Obviously, that didn't happen, and they were one of the first films to quickly pivot to a free virtual event. My next screening was going to be at Sheffield Doc Fest. It seemed a little more like it might happen because things weren't so bad over there. Then they got worse, and that turned virtual only as well. And it was a bummer, right? Just kind of, having already booked tickets, which I got refunded for, thankfully. But just, I really wanted to have that in-person experience and meet some colleagues, and wasn't able to do so. And then the summer happened. George Floyd was murdered, and in Oakland especially, there were a number of protests happening, which I was attending, and seeing ways in which people were being conscientious about gathering outside with intention and with a consciousness of keeping everyone safe and healthy. So what we eventually landed on was a festival that would happen at a single outdoor location, open air parking lot in downtown Oakland, right next to the Tribune Tower, which is managed by a group called Endeavors Oakland, who were great collaborators for us. And we just projected on a giant brick wall. We maxed our capacity so we could maintain social distancing, do contact tracing, the temp checks, all that good stuff. We also had free hot cocoa. And it was fun. It was super fun. It was like the only thing a lot of us had done for, the past 8 months, give or take. And we recognize, that not everyone who would normally attend Drunken Film Fest would show up. So we also had a virtual component on Twitch, which was free and live. So trying to keep our ethos of being a free film festival. We're always free, accessible, inclusive, and really something Lisa was talking about her intro about post-cinema, the dissolution of boundaries is something, we've been doing since the beginning, trying to sort of bring the cinematic exhibition space into people's, everyday lived realities. Why must it always be this sort of thing of pursuing cinema? Why can't cinema just kind of happen to you, And then especially with a lot of the work we screen, is great, thoughtful, just visually stunning short work that most people won't have the opportunity to see unless they seek it out at a major film festival, which can, as we've already discussed, present problems of access and inclusivity, and they could be intimidating both for film goers and filmmakers. So it's always been our intention to try and create an inviting, non-threatening, casual space. We have lots of filmmakers attend our screenings, and we've sort of done away with the formal Q&A thing. And during our intermissions, we'll just say, hey, Chris is over there. He directed this movie. Hit him up if you want to tell him what you thought about it. And filmmakers, I think, have appreciated that. It turns it into less of a formalized thing and just more of a everyday conversation. So yeah, we're doing it this year again. We're hopeful about being able to return to bars, and it is fun.
Thank you so much. That was incredible to listen to you, to all of what you envision for that film festival and what you're doing there for the community. I very much enjoyed that, and having that just like the incidence of bumping into a film, as you're saying, or like getting to know or talking to a filmmaker about it is the beauty of also these very accessible and very just happening at somewhere where you wouldn't have expect to really watch a movie. I have a question coming in, Arlene, about the films and your background. And
sure.
yeah, somebody is asking what your favorite film of these is. Can you tell us about that?
Oh my God. Well, I guess
Very briefly, because we are already. I'm.
Sorry, my boilerplate favorite film is Hoop Dreams. I got this signed by Steve James when I interviewed him for his film Abacus. But this, growing up in Chicago, just a mind-blowing film. Something new gleaned every time. I can't reach it now, but the other VHS up there is American Movie, which is another just incredible Midwest documentary that has been very formative in my taste and humor and aspirations, I think, as a documentarian.
Thank you so much. It was, we have covered so many things. I feel it's been such an incredible journey, and like you connected already everything and so many aspects also to what Lisa said at the very beginning. And I have so much enjoyed sharing that you have been sharing your experiences, your visions, and everything you are doing with us, and with all these expertise in such a broad sense. Thank you so very much. Perhaps we are running super short on time, but perhaps everybody could just have one statement of a vision for the close future. It can be in conjunction with the beauty of immersion, whatever that means for you, and very brief, and then we wrap it up. Thank you so much. Aline, do you want to start already?
Sure. Let's see. I guess hopes for the future are, I think the lids sort of come off on virtual screenings and virtual festivals. I think there are, lots of benefits of that, especially around accessibility. But I truly hope that in-person thing comes back stronger than ever. I think, as we've talked about, there's just something unreplicatable about cinematic experiences, whether or not they're in a theater or a bar or a parking lot. But you know, the joy and revelatory nature of communal viewing experiences, especially after a year watching so many new films and festival screenings at home, and just having to lock my phone in the other room, and getting hungry and going to the bathroom, as we talked about. It's just what interesting like interpretations or I guess like moods can be set for you when you don't have those options. We've talked about like agency as a film goer, and what's the film viewing experience when you have to hold it in because you don't want to miss anything. So I truly hope, and it's weird seeing things that have been going on with studio vertical integration and acquisitions by tech companies of theaters and theater chains. So it's all up in the air and it's all scary. But I it seems that the art house and the independent cinemas and independent film festivals, will continue to pave the way forward.
Super well said. I might just add that I agree. I do not believe that we are done with gathering in person. There's just something too precious about that experience. And I think that what's changing is our self-awareness around where we choose to go, who we choose to give our money to, which establishments we want to support, which establishments we want to show our films. And so there's this newfound sort of intention and awareness around that. And on the back end of things, I see a lot of coalition building happening across art houses, nationally and internationally, sharing resources, recommending filmmakers to each other, touring packagers across our institutions. And these types of collaborations have just become stronger and more readily available through the virtual platforms, but I think they're going to continue into the future, and we're all going to benefit from those cross-organizational conversations that are happening in the background.
So I also agree with both of you. I really miss theaters, cinema. I haven't been there for I think a year and a half, and the last movie I saw was Cats. So don't judge me. In terms of accessibility and the future, a movie ticket costs $20. A VR headset costs much more. So accessibility of new mediums, new technologies for everyone is something that I hope would be much more mainstream, so everyone can access it, not only for entertainment, but also education. And also, there is a very, very important subject that we didn't talk about, which is ethics and surveillance capitalism. Today, you know, companies can track your pupils and recognize who you are, identify you by the movement of your pupils. And companies like Facebook, who are advancing the field because they own Oculus, are also the companies who know how to to make the big bucks off of it. So I am, you know, trying to be optimistic about the future, but you know, ethical. There are a lot of ethical questions about new mediums that we should always keep in mind. And thank you again for this panel.
Yeah, what else can I say? I think the pandemic has created a great deal of change for all of us. But with all that disruption and change, I think it's a safe bet that we are all going to spend a lot of time watching movies on screens, both large and small, in the future. So I think the main question will be selecting and curating. And as you said, Rana, curating is also about trust. And if I may add that it's also about commitment. So the way we deal with films is a question of commitment as well. So that is my wish and hope for the future, that we'll keep on committing ourselves to films.
That's all of these were beautiful last words for this panel. Thank you so much. It was very enriching for me. It was very delightful. I have learned so many things, and most of all, I really enjoyed being here with all of you, and I'm grateful for that. And Nim, to get back to what you said, I have already something in mind about the ethical concerns, and I would love for all of us to revisit also the topic again at some point. This panel is part of the Goethe Forum at Berlin and Beyond Film Festival, and please explore all the other opportunities as well of exciting films you're still able to watch through Sunday. Let me highlight one event in particular in this context. Tonight we have a scheduled screening of the Boundary Pushing Vision Berlin Alexanderplatz, followed by a special Q&A with the director Burhan Kobani and moderated by a wonderful film curator and critic, Katharina Hedrin. This screening is scheduled for tonight, starting at 7 p.m. And we spoke about going to the theater. We have a scheduled screening tomorrow night at 7 p.m. at the Vogue Theater here in San Francisco. So please join us for that as well. Low capacity, but still, I'm looking forward to that. I'm very grateful for having you join me for the conversation. Lisa Gotto, Nimrod Shapira, Rana Sun and Arlene Golden. Thank you so much. I will come to the Drunken Film Festival to Oakland for sure and meet you there. Rana, I would love to come by in Seattle to really dive into the Northwestern Film Forum. Thank you so much. Nim, I will keep on watching your films, and I'm looking forward to that. And Lisa, I will go on reading your research and follow that. Thank you also, everybody, for tuning in. And I also want to thank my colleagues again, Martin Schwartz, Arabelle Leopold, Sarah Stevenson, Sophie Sohn. Thank you so much, and all the people in the background of this event. My name is Bettina Brianka, and have a beautiful rest of the day and a restful and safe weekend, and see you hopefully soon. Bye. Thank you.
Yeah.